I would like to take a moment with this wonderful picture in the background to read some of the bill that we have just introduced today. Congress finds that the women Air Force service pilots of World War II, known as the WASP, were the first women in history to fly American military aircraft. More than 60 years ago, they flew fighter, bomber, transport, and training aircraft in defense of America's freedom. They faced overwhelming cultural and gender bias against women in non-traditional roles and overcame multiple injustices and inequities in order to serve their country. Through their actions, the WASP eventually were the catalyst for revolutionary reform in the integration of women pilots into the armed services. During the early months of World War II, there was a severe shortage of combat pilots. Jacqueline Cochran, America's leading woman pilot of the time, convinced General Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Forces, that women, if given the same training as men, would be equally capable of flying military aircraft and could then take over some of the stateside military flying jobs, thereby releasing hundreds of male pilots for combat duty. The severe loss of male combat pilots made the necessity of utilizing women pilots to help in the war effort clear to General Arnold, and a women's pilot training program was soon approved. It was not until August 1943 that the women aviators would receive their official name. General Arnold ordered that all women pilots flying military aircraft, including 28 civilian women ferry pilots, would be named WASP. More than 25,000 American women applied for training, but only 1,830 were accepted and took the oath. Exactly 1,074 of those trainees successfully completed the 21 to 27 weeks of Army Air Force flight training, graduated, and received their Army Air Force orders to report to their assigned air base. On November 16, 1942, the first class of 29 women pilots reported to the Houston, Texas Municipal Airport and began the same military flight training as the male Army Air Force cadets were taking. Due to a lack of adequate facilities at that airport, 3 months later, the training program was moved to Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas. WASP were eventually stationed at 120 Army air bases all across America. They flew more than 60 million miles for their country in every type of aircraft, every type of assignment except combat. WASP assignments included test piloting, instructor piloting, towing targets for air-to-air gunnery practice, ground-to-air anti-aircraft practice, ferrying, transporting personnel and cargo, including parts for the atomic bomb, simulated strafing, smoke laying, night tracking, and flying drones. In October 1943, male pilots were refusing to fly the B-26 Martin Marauder, known as the Widowmaker, because of its fatality records. General Arnold ordered WASP Director Jacqueline Cochran to select 25 WASP to be trained to fly the B-26 to prove to the male pilots that it was safe to fly. During the existence of WASP, 38 women lost their lives while serving their country. Their bodies were sent home in poorly crafted pine boxes. Their burial was at the expense of their families or classmates. There were no gold stars allowed in their parents' windows. And because they were not considered military, no American flags were allowed on their coffins. In 1944, General Arnold made a personal request to Congress to militarize the WASP, and it was denied. On December 7, 1944, in a speech to the last graduating class of WASP, General Arnold said, I quote, "You and more than 900 of your sisters have shown you can fly wingtip to wingtip with your brothers. I salute you. We of the Army Air Force are proud of you. We will never forget our debt to you." With victory in World War II almost certain, on December 20, 1944, the WASP were quietly and unceremoniously disbanded. There were no honors, no benefits, and very few thank yous. Just as they had paid their own way to enter training, they paid their way back home after their honorable service to the military. The WASP military records were immediately sealed, stamped classified or secret, and filed away in government archives, unavailable to the historians who wrote the history of World War II or the scholars who compiled the history textbooks used today, with many of the records not declassified until the 1980s. Consequently, the WASP story is a missing chapter in the history of the Air Force, the history of aviation, and the history of the United States of America. In 1977, 33 years after the WASP were disbanded, the Congress finally voted to give the WASP the veteran status they had earned. But these heroic pilots were not invited to the signing ceremony at the White House. And it was not until 7 years later that their medals were delivered in the mail in plain brown envelopes. In the late 1970s, more than 30 years after the WASP flew in World War II, women were finally permitted to attend military pilot training in the United States Armed Forces. Thousands of women aviators flying support aircraft have benefited from the service of the WASP and followed in their footsteps. In 1993, the WASP were once again referenced during congressional hearings regarding the contributions that women could make to the military, which eventually led to women being able to fly military fighter, bomber, and attack aircraft in combat. Hundreds of United States servicewomen, combat pilots, have seized the opportunity to fly fighter aircraft in recent conflicts, all thanks to the pioneering steps taken by the WASP. The WASP have maintained a tight-knit community forged by the common experiences of serving their country during war. As part of their desire to educate America on the WASP history, WASP have assisted Wings Across America, an organization dedicated to educating the American public with much effort aimed at children about the remarkable accomplishments of these World War II veterans. They have been honored by exhibits by museums throughout our country. And now, Mr. President, it is time to give these incredible women pioneers the Congressional Gold Medal, which I think, along with the Tuskegee Airmen and the Navajo Code Talkers, are people who have served with courage and valor to our country. And they are people who really have not complained. They are people who did their duty, even with some discrimination in the armed forces. But they were never bitter, and they always knew what a service they had given. We have now honored the Navajo Code Talkers, and we have honored the great Tuskegee Airmen. And I hope we will also accord the greatest honor that we can bestow as Congress to the WASP of World War II. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.